some of the, the artificial intelligence developments, especially within DC government. This was a fun one for me, and I hope everybody on the call today enjoys it. Every time I tap my screen, it moves. But I hope everyone enjoys this. This isn't very insightful.
I think we would say thanks back to you, Maurice, for leading the conversation and putting all this together.
All right, see, yeah, we got that big jump in just 1 minute. It went from the 20s to the 40s. And we'll go ahead and get started. It's 1:02. Welcome to the Fireside Chat. This is Artificial Intelligence and Ethics. And of course, this is Ethics Week 2023. And our theme this year is Everyday Ethics. Can't go a day without it. And so just like many of our decisions within DC government, ethics plays a big role. And I'm hoping everybody on the call is as big as a science fiction nerd as I am, and who I think Hersh and Todd to be as well, because I just found it very interesting, just, being a fan of science fiction, how as time goes by, a lot of that, stuff that we would consider fiction is, becoming reality. And so in the case, it's just interesting to see where we're at right now with, what we've become familiar with from previous, our previous experiences being, movies or books or whatever we were at as children or teenagers or even coming into adulthood. And so just a little disclaimer, the images used in this training are for educational purposes only, and they're not intended for sale or any commercial use. I will show some clips from time to time just to touch base on some of the topics that are presented within the slides. And so today we have on the call is Hersh Gupta. He is a data scientist with Washington, D.C.'s Office of Chief Technology Officer. And in this role, he collaborates with the Chief Data Officer to help DC agencies leverage data science more effectively with a focus on data strategy. He holds a master's degree in computational social science from Boston University. He is also a fellow at the lab at DC, the district's applied research group that is housed in the Office of the City Administrator. And there he collaborates with DC agencies to build and apply AI and machine learning models. And then also on the call is Todd Smith. He is the general counsel for DC's Office of the Chief Technology Officer, and he leads OCTO's Office of General Counsel and provides OCTO and its sister agencies with subject matter expertise in the intersection of law and technology. He is a graduate with honors of the George Washington University Law School, where he was a Thurgood Marshall Scholar and winner of the Harry R. Berger Award. All right, and we'll go ahead and get started. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Maurice Echols, attorney advisor for the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. And I'll be, sort of your moderator this evening or this afternoon. Basically, we can skip these two slides. All right, so our first question up for today that you guys can give us some insight on is basically what is artificial intelligence and what are the different types? I put this clip up from iRobot, if anyone is familiar. This is a movie where one of the themes were rules or covenants that the AI robots were basically programmed with that framed their decision making. And I just wanted to start off by pointing out that similarly, we have an ethics code that articulates a set of rules and that we should use as a framework to guide our choices in our government work. So that's why that picture is there. But just leading into the context of that question, what is artificial intelligence? I understand it to be, an analysis of rules that, the program may have, but you guys can elaborate on it.
Hersh, do you want to lead off just on a general explanation, I guess, and you and I will just talk a little bit about sort of what kind of applications people are going to run into in a government context?
Sure. So AI, artificial intelligence, it's been around for quite a while. It's pretty nebulous as a term. It can mean many different things, but generally, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, it can apply to anything in which you have human agents that are capable of intaking information, processing it, and responding meaningfully. Sometimes that's with algorithms, sometimes that's with rules that you decide, that whoever's building the AI decides. And the idea is to model human-like intelligence, whether it's assisting with decision-making or thinking about the way that we're selecting information and creating those outputs. AI is used a lot in news articles and promotional materials and drafting government regulations, and describes more of a loose collection of products that are operating in the real world, along with a rich variety of anticipated future products being prepared for the market.
So just to sort of hop into it, I think to bring it down to like the most simple level, the best way to think about it is the science of artificial intelligence is and has been, I guess the term's coined in the 1950s, but the idea of non-human agents, things that are able to act with agency and interact with humans, goes back a long way, right? Depending on how you define it. I think the earliest example I read about was there were self-regulating water clocks in ancient Egypt, like I think about 1300 years or something before or BC. So really, as soon as we started trying to introduce agency other than human-driven agency into the environment in which we live, we started looking at and thinking about AI. The products you'll see today, so like if you read a newspaper article about an image generator, a text generator, those work off of obviously computer code, and they have a central model that like intakes information. It then processes it according to rules. The rules are like both computer code that direct it how to process, as well as what you can think of as like goals, which is like the states it wants to get to. A good example of a goal in AI that's like immediately concrete, like visible, would be self-driving cars or even just your navigation app on your phone. The goal is to get you from your current location to your endpoint that you've designated, right? So goals are kind of the endpoint for an AI model or an AI agent, a non-human agent. The thing that guides them as they pursue their goals, the discipline sort of refers to as utilities. So like you want to maximize utilities. These can be sometimes conflicting. So there's trade-offs in the context of like a self-driving car or even an app that's telling you how to get to where you're going when you're driving. There's kind of utilities you'd be maximizing are things like, avoiding interrupting other drivers. So like no excessive lane changing, right? If you didn't have that as a utility, then if it would shave 30 seconds off your trip, your self-driving car might change lanes, 3-digit number of times, right? Or more, or an insane number of times. But other utilities are avoiding like police interaction, right? So otherwise it might speed anywhere that it thinks it can get away with speeding. Other utilities be safety. So these are the kind of things that aren't even that concrete, right? So there's other soft utilities that a complex AI model is aware of, right? So, stopping and starting a car gradually just because it wants to minimize jostling the passenger cabin be another utility that, using the code that drives it, the AI model weigh these all against one another, right? So that's sort of how it thinks and what an AI model does in a given product. As far as uses that you're going to see, the biggest things that people talk about most are large language models. Those just take in text and then process the text. The text that it's taking in is sometimes called a prompt. So you might say, write me a poem about X or Y or Z in whatever style, and then it'll pop out a poem or something that seems like a poem in that style. And that's the output, right? So your input is a text prompt, the output is natural language text. And that's kind of what a large language model does. Most of those are like general models right now. As the market develops, you're going to see more special purpose models. So, for example, like there might be a product offered, by a legal research company that helps with brief writing or summarizing cases, right? Why would that be different from a general model? Because it would need to be validated and trained specifically to like understand terms in their legal context, right? Understand concepts that a general model wouldn't about like the validity of case citations, right? So that narrowing of a general model to a specific tool is kind of what's going on right now in the market, and the like anticipated tools that you'll likely see will be narrowed in that way and have specific application, whereas like the generalist tools will still be the sort of fun, like the image generators you see online, those kind of things. Other AI that's not as prevalent in the news but worth being aware of because it's a big part of your life generally are like GIS data processing ones, or like the map on your phone. I wouldn't say the current version of MPD's, I think it's called Crime Cards program. That's not really AI driven yet, but it easily could be improved with AI. Right. So that's drawing GIS data as its input. GIS is just like and I'm going to get this wrong, and Hersh will correct me, but geographic, I think, or geographical.
Spatial.
Yeah, geospatial. Thank you. Geospatial information system is GIS. So like where GIS data can be improved in its presentation with AI would be, for example, if you wanted to know not just about where crime's occurring, but other details drawn from, other open data sources like the model of a car, and if there was a car theft or something trend that MPD was following. And outside of like public safety, like if you just want to know, what kind of trees are in your neighborhood, how many trees of a certain kind are in your neighborhood, that processing of data is, it's a natural language query coming in from you to answer the question. The model draws GIS data from DC's open data system, processes it, and then gives you a natural language output. It tells you, number of trees, the kind of cars that are being involved in incidents, things like that. And again, it's the same way your map works. Your map's way simpler, but like the map that you use to get where you're going whenever you're using Waze or Apple Maps or whatever is doing the same thing, drawing GIS data in and responding to your single initial natural language prompt when you gave it an address to get you to, and then responding in a less complex version of natural language by saying turn left up ahead, turn right up ahead.
Right.
I'll just clarify with the different types of AI. AI is a very broad term. So you can think about it as all trucks are cars, but not all cars are trucks. All generative AI is AI, but not all AI is generative AI. And Todd, you alluded to some of the different versions of AI that's outside of generative AI, whether it's computer vision, trying to understand, in the case of a driving car, whether or not a person is crossing the street, or if they're riding a bicycle, or if there's a truck ahead of you. And then there's machine learning as well, which is another type of AI. And you can think of that as something like recommendation systems. Say if you purchase a product on Amazon, they'll recommend you something that's similar to that product or accompanies it based off of machine learning algorithms. They can be used to predict things in the government context. You can use machine learning to predict any likelihoods that you would want, whether it's likelihood of a process being completed or whether it's the likelihood of a process encountering an error, right? So those are things that can be trained on data, the similar way that generative AI can be trained on large amounts of text data to come up and predict the next outputs that you would expect based off of your natural language inputs.
Okay, yeah, that is very interesting. So, I mean, you alluded to it basically just talking about it just then, but I was wondering how Amazon knew that I would want a flashlight that can probably light up an entire city block. because I've never searched for anything like that before. But once I was advertising, I wanted it, and was and was wondering why it chose me.
Yeah, I think Hersh hit the nail on the head with that one. It's
Right.
so machine learning is kind of there's two ways kind of to teach a computer program to do something, right? You directly program it. A good example of that would be like, let's say we wanted to build an agent that can vacuum a floor, right? So it's going to need to be able to scan the room that it's in. It's going to need to be able to tell whether the room is clean or dirty. It's going to need to be able to like apprehend its current position. It's going to need to be able to navigate itself around the room using its wheels, which are its actuators. It's going to need sensors that tell it information about the room, where it is, what other obstacles are in the room, things like that. Even in so simple a thing as a two-dimensional vacuum, moving on a flat plane. If you think about like trying to apply that in the real world with a model that doesn't need a human to come in and like tell it what to do, there's kind of two ways to program it. One is the way that no one uses, because you only learn about it like in like introductory courses as a way not to do things. Would be like a table-driven agent where like literally you say if this then this, if this then this. The reason no one uses it is because like if you tried to have a table that accounted for every possible operation in response to every possible input that this little small like closet vacuuming two-dimensional machine is going to be confronting as it goes about its business, you're going to be into like scientific notation, like x times 10 to the 15, 25 or whatever, like humongous numbers of cells you need in the table to confront every possible situation it might run into. So like to actually pre-program a thing manually to do anything in the real world, you're going to have like huge processing demands that even with today's super fast computers, you're never going to be able to meet. And you're going to have like huge human hour demands of like trying to literally anticipate and provide a specific reaction to every single situation you're going to run into. So instead, and there's, so the long spectrums is super, even from the little bit I know, like, and Hersh knows a lot more than I do about AI, but from the, I know about the law part, but like from the little bit I know, this is still huge, what would I say, concentration. But like the alternative is machine learning. Machine learning is basically where an actor is able to improve its own, like assess and improve its own performance iteratively, right? So like as it runs, it improves its programming. It improves the way that it solves the same problems it's been asked to save. So like in your case with like a recommendation algorithm, everything that it learns about you, like all of the intake that you provide to Amazon when you're logged in or whenever you have an Amazon app and download it on your phone or whatever else, that all provides input for a model to process. And based on the selections you make, it keeps improving its model of you to then like forecast what you might like. And it does that probably, I don't know, because I don't know, I've never worked for Amazon, but it does that probably by comparing you to people it's categorized as having similar spending habits, right? Whether that's geographically or by the things you bought in the past or by the services you download or whatever. It's probably a mix of all that. But Hersh can probably fine tune that one a little bit for me because again, like this is data and data in particular is right in his bailiwick.
So yeah, we can go to the next question. So just a little prelude. Of course, this is the movie Matrix. I'm hoping you all have seen it. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. So in this particular scene, Neo met the architect. The architect was a computer program, but it was also, I guess, a form of artificial intelligence that designed the Matrix. And so in part of the speech, I'm only going to play a part of it, but he kind of talks on topics of efficiency. And one of his goals was to provide just the right amount of, stimuli to their host. I don't want to give the whole movie away if someone's on the call has never seen it, but he wanted to give a right amount of stimuli to their host to keep them asleep. And also with that, there was a chaos factor that kind of disrupted that program. And then just for any data or theology or philosophy people are, for people that are listening in, you kind of recognize that there's always, a little bit of an anomaly that's present in a system. an element of chaos, if you will. But I'm just going to play the scene just to jog people's memories of what was going on here, and then sort of the mental interplay and talks of what the system was. Can everyone hear that? Does the sound come through? Can you hear that, Todd?
Not yet.
Did you hear the sound?
I can't yet. No.
Not yet. Let's see if I can adjust something because it blasts on my end. It's hard to do these things without a test run. Display settings. That's not it. Let's see. I ran into this problem yesterday. Any of you all know how to get WebEx to to play sound on an embedded video? If it comes down to it, there's a way to turn on subtitles. Are you missing music mode and audio session? Let's see here. Do I got something in my menu? Pick up video and audio settings is talking about me. I wanted to do the PowerPoint. Pick the video system. That sucks. So anyways, I'll just go on and elaborate in this scene. I want you to go back and look up the matrix, maybe even look up this scene. This is the scene where he meets the architect. And the dialogue back and forth was just very interesting to me. It just talks about the mathematical structure and just some of the encumbrances that he was working around to try to get the matrix to work right. And so with that being said, does the government or district government use artificial intelligence? And if so, how does it help facilitate productivity or efficiency within DC government work? And then do we run into, any chaos or factors that, just cause something to be, not right?
Yeah, I can start with an example for this, and let me go back to the 1960s. In the 60s, when folks would send in mail to the post office, they would have all sorts of handwriting, and people would manually try and interpret which way this mail is trying to go and who it's addressed to. And in the 60s, they started using computers to process the addresses on those envelopes. And that was artificial intelligence. For the first time, you have something, it's called optical character recognition, to be able to recognize this is the street address, this is the city, this is where it needs to go to, this is the zip code. And at that point in time, this was revolutionary. It was artificial intelligence at the cutting edge. People were developing it. It was very rare to see. And very similarly, you have nowadays artificial intelligence and generative AI becoming more embedded into our systems. While it's not generative AI, we're all using AI right now, right this very second. The audio processing in WebEx filters out background noise. That is a type of artificial intelligence. All this to say that we're using artificial intelligence, but we may not be calling it artificial intelligence. And in the future, we may not be calling generative AI when it's built into Word documents, when it's built into spreadsheets, we're probably not going to be calling it artificial intelligence. We'll be calling it maybe something else, but it helps facilitate productivity by becoming a part of the products that we use in our day-to-day work. I'm not sure what a chaos factor would look like in this case, and the chaos factor may be controlled by the companies that are building these products, right? They're the ones that decide how AI gets implemented, how folks will use it, and how folks will use it safely. And we abdicate a lot of that responsibility to these tech companies, especially when we're talking about large language models that have a lot of data that they're being trained on. We as the public require them to build responsibly and build products that can accomplish our work goals in a manner that will comply with some of our ethical considerations. Todd, feel free to add to that.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, just to sort of demystify AI, Hersh hit directly on that starting out, and that's already embedded in a lot. Like, I'm not right now sitting in the middle of my camera's field of view, right? I have a virtual camera that moves me to the middle of the frame. You know what I mean? That it's doing that all on its own. I haven't taught it how to do that. It figures it out based on real world input. From an ethics perspective, you probably want to think about the use of AI in government sort of at this stage in 3 different ways, right? The first is embedded AI functionality in products that everyone uses, right? So there's predictive text on your phone, predictive text in Outlook. The mapping we discussed earlier, it's in our camera, it's in the noise filtering. That kind of like embedded AI you're already using, and there's not a it's what would I say? It's what the proposed EU regulations would call a very low risk use of AI, right? And it's probably going to remain unregulated because it's very low risk, right? Just to close that point, just if anybody was appetite was whetted by that. The EU model has like a medium tier sort of like self-regulation risk, and then like high tier affirmative regulation risk, and then an unacceptable risk category. So it's like it's a proposal to regulate AI that of course the federal government's very aware of, China's very aware of, and everybody's modeling off of one another right now. But it's a risk management framework model, sort of for figuring out the best oversight or level of oversight that's necessary for an AI tool. But the other 2 categories, other than what's embedded, is consumer AI products and enterprise AI products, right? So like a consumer one would be something like ChatGPT that you download on your phone, or any of these like browser-based ones you can go to get text or images or whatever. And from an ethics perspective, you shouldn't be using those in your DC government work for a lot of reasons that I'll go through here in a second, just to close out that little list of 3. The other kind is enterprise products. Those are the ones that like, and I'm using that term a little more broadly than we use it in OCTO, but it's the products that your agency buys or licenses or comes into possession of by whatever means, that they've vetted and approved for you to use. Those are the ones that you can use in your work as long as you follow the rules associated with that product, right? So to drill down a little bit more on why you shouldn't be using consumer AI, let's see, I have a list here of all of the things I'm going to cover on that. The first and most important one is it hasn't been tested for the use that you're putting it to. So, and I don't just mean tested in whether or not it delivers like expected outcomes. I mean like tested for, does it discriminate on the basis of a protected trait? Is it literally causing a disparate impact in a way that creates liability for the district or causes us to basically do a bad job for the people we serve? But in addition, there's sometimes, and this comes up with software, whenever people use software that isn't approved by their agency, is a lot of like public facing things they're made available subject to a license. People generally don't read those licenses, they just click through them. The license, at at least for software, usually says you can't use it for commercial purposes or professional purposes or whatever. So whenever you do use it in that way, so in other words, they'll make a free version of their product available online for anyone to use, but in the terms of the license to use that product, it'll say, you're using this for personal use, non-commercial use, whatever. If you then use it for a commercial use, you're exceeding the terms of your license. And if you're doing it on behalf of the district, you invite problems for the district, because obviously the manufacturer is going to suggest that you, acting as the agent of the district, have bound the agency to to pay for this license, this commercial license to a product that you're using. And this isn't really a hypothetical. Like, this happens. So we get requests every once in a while from OCTO, from software companies, and they'll say, hey, we've noticed on your system we have X number of machines actively running whatever the given software is, and you either have no licenses with us or you have Y number of licenses, and X is bigger than Y. So we'd like to audit your use of our software so that we can true up what you should be paying us. This cost concern is another reason why you shouldn't be using consumer-based AI, because it's usually not, whenever something like that is made free, it's usually not free for all purposes. It's not usually free for commercial purposes, because the same company wants to be able to turn around and sell to commercial entities, right? They'll make it free for you to use. It's kind of like Westlaw. I saw a Westlaw reference in the chat. It's kind of like Westlaw with law school. Whenever you're in law school, Westlaw is free and Lexis is free, because they want you to get familiar with it. But you can't turn around and do, like in your summer internships and stuff, you can't turn around and do commercial legal research using your student account. You're exceeding the terms of your student license, and they definitely want to be able to sell an extra Westlaw license to your employer, not have this weird illegal workaround where a student's using their student license for commercial reasons. This is another flag, sort of, whenever you're looking at the use of consumer tools for a professional purpose. Another, let's see. I shouldn't burn too much time on that. On the third question. Yeah. Oh, so no. There's one more. I need one more bullet point. This is why I listed them out, so I don't forget. The other important bullet point on why you shouldn't use consumer AI, and this is maybe second in terms of importance after the discrimination concern, is data security and cybersecurity. We have no control over systems that are made available on the internet. We only have control over systems we negotiate the terms for. So if you were to, and this will be a good segue into the last bullet point there about what you should be using. But if you were to use, let's say you have two instances of a large language model, right? There's the one you can get for free on the internet, and then there's one that your agency buys a license to. And you want to use it, and this is a perfectly reasonable use for the professional one, but you want to use it to summarize your case files, right? So maybe you're a social worker and you just got assigned, you just got hired, you just got assigned a bunch of cases. You don't want to disadvantage the people that you're working with by them having to just sit still for a month while you read up on all of your case files. You want to be able to get productive right out of the gate. So you want to be able to dump all of your case files into this large language model, have it read and summarize each of them for you, right? If you dump that into a consumer-facing one, we have absolutely no idea where all of that confidential data is going. And we have no controls, and we have no way to reel it back in, and you may have broken one or more federal laws right away. If you instead use an approved of the same hypothetical LLM, right? If you use an approved instance, right, where we've negotiated specifically how data will be handled, right, and how data input will be treated after you end a session with that AI or whatever, or you log off, or I don't know, you close that case. It might delete it, it might leave it saved on our little part of their cloud, but it won't be integrating it into other users' answers, right? It won't be drawing from it. There we do have control, right? And there it's okay, and you don't have a cybersecurity concern anymore, and you don't have a data security concern anymore. a broad statement, but I'll stick with it for now. So that's that super important distinction.
There's a quick question. Is there a rollout of AI products?
That's my third bullet point.
Okay. Right. Go ahead.
So you guys are following right along. It's excellent. So the third bullet point is, what are we doing? So I just told you not to use the consumer available stuff. And why not to use the consumer available stuff? Well, what are we doing? So OCTO is piloting 4 AI tools, right? They're at various stages. I don't know if they're live or not yet. I don't think they're live. But one is dc.gov AI. And what that's doing is basically standing up a chatbot for the public or anyone to talk to and find where to go in DC government or get answers from all of the DC government websites. So anyone who's like surfed around looking for an answer, especially someone who's like new to DC government when they're trying to become familiar with all that we do, like I probably should know, but I don't. I think it's on the order of like 73 agencies or something. It might be significantly more or less, but ballpark, that's my guess, is I think it's something like 73 agencies. And that's a lot of websites, right? And there's a lot of web pages on those websites. So, if you're a member of the public, or if you have like an immediate need, or you're not the most sophisticated internet user out there, that can be daunting, right? And it can be a gap between you and the government services you're trying to get access to. So, so this kind of chatbot, the goal is to basically have a smart, large language model driven window pop up and say, hey, what do you want to know about DC government? What are you looking for? Hey, I'm looking for, I'm trying to find out how to file my taxes. I don't know. And it'll say, oh, this is where you need to go, or whatever. So, so that's one of the 4 pilots we're working on, is a dc.gov chatbot to like better navigate dc.gov. The next is an AI tutor, which is super interesting, but way simpler to describe. It's just an interface that helps with like both like transitioning like audio to text or text to audio, that could help with answering student follow-up questions while like making the best use of teacher time. And these you'll see this like video generative AI, where like you can like some can change the way your mouth is presenting as if you're speaking in a foreign language whenever it translates to a foreign language, right? So, so there's a variety of language options and shrinking language barriers that that could be helpful, right? I mean, anybody who's studied a specific, usually this happens a lot in like college and definitely happens a lot in law school, you'll get into disciplines where like you really know the material and you want to be graded on that, not regraded on English, right? Like you have your English test, right, and you take that, and that's great. Like in law school, it's the professors do try their best to like ignore the quality of the writing in your final exams and like see, okay, what do you really know about bankruptcy? I don't really care how well you're writing your essay. I want to know what you know about bankruptcy. So like these kind of tools help to sort of protect students from being regraded on English language proficiency in every single subject, right? Because you shrink that language gap barrier or whatever. So that's, I think, a really good outcome if the tool proves to be effective and ends up working well. And I'll move on to the next one. Is this one will sound familiar because I was just talking about some of the concerns whenever I was saying why not to use consumer AI. It is not a SCIF. It's a branding. We call it the DC AI SCIF that we're working on. SCIF is like what is it? Security compartmentalized information, something. I don't know. But it's the usually in federal and like usually in like the intelligence community and stuff like that. These like special places where very sensitive data can be discussed or used or whatever without the risk of it leaking out. And that's why that's what we're referring to.
Let's save that bullet for the next slide.
Well, so without getting too in detail, but like we're working on an instance where agents would be able to play in AI with data that is sensitive without having to worry about losing it. And then just the last bullet point is AI for open data, which is like the tree thing I was talking about. So DC makes available a huge catalog of open data, and it's building tools to help the public better use it. So like you don't have to be a computer scientist to create a dashboard anymore. You would be able to just query in natural language and say, I want to know more about my neighborhood. What can you tell me? Or I want to know more about my government. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Whoops. Did I do something? Are you able to hear that sound now? I changed it to music mode. Still no sound? Okay. All right. We'll go to the next slide. Man, that sucks. Oh yeah, this is a quick and easy question. We talked about this before, but I'm sure they would like to know the answer to this question as well. If you use artificial intelligence to produce a work product, is a resulting work product your intellectual property?
I'm happy to address that one. I'll try to speak up a little bit. I saw in the chat that my voice was fading sometimes, so I'm just I'm just gonna talk loud. I hope it's not off-putting if I'm too loud. So threshold answer is even before AI becomes a part of the question, you probably don't own the intellectual property rights to your work product, right? There's sort of two open questions for that legally that we won't resolve today. One is there's a body of intellectual property law called like work for hire, right? And there's court defined tests for when an employee does a thing. Is that thing considered work for hire that belongs immediately to the employer, or is it the employee's own work? Probably stuff you do on the clock for DC government is probably DC government's in terms of work for hire, right? The other concept is there's an open question because DC is not yet a state. There's an open question whether DC can hold copyright because the federal government is disqualified from holding copyright, but the states are allowed to. So if you work for the federal government and something would be it's different if you're a contractor, but if you work for the federal government and you generate IP, it very well might go directly into the public domain, right? So that's an open question. DC government asserts copyright, so that is the position of DC government, as far as I'm aware. It's like right there in the terms and conditions on our websites, I think, that says we assert copyright. But that's the other question, sort of whether or not at the threshold you own the IP of what you generate at work. As far as when AI gets involved, well, what AI creates is not intellectual property. And that's based on two opinions right now that are coming out of, and two opinions and a federal district opinion, I think, as well. So two administrative opinions and one federal district opinion right now. The administrative ones are the patent office has determined that AI generated patents aren't patentable because there's no human agent to apply for the patent. And the Copyright Office has determined that that AI generated material within a copyright application must both be affirmatively disclaimed. So you have to admit that there's AI work in there and identify it so that you don't accidentally get a copyright registered for AI generated work. And then you can get the rest of your work registered and have copyright protection. So I can talk a little bit about the facts of this without burning too much time. The case that drew attention, it was a lady had created a comic book for or on this this text to image generator called, I think, Midjourney. And the prompts are hers, so she would engineer prompts to get the images she wants. All the dialogue was hers. And after Midjourney generated these images, she like went through and like Photoshop or something like that and like tweaked them, right? Took out the extra fingers if it hallucinated like 9 fingers on each hand, that kind of thing. And she tried to register the copyright, and the Copyright Office said, you have copyright on the text, you have copyright on the tweaks you made to the images, but the images themselves are not sufficiently original under the Copyright Act, so they cannot be copyrighted. And that means they're just kind of in the public domain. That I don't know if it was that case or it's a similar one, but one of those went up from the Copyright Office to DC District Court, and the Copyright Office was affirmed. So long story short, no, you don't own it.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, so essentially, like if you were to create like a cartoon character, or DC government was to create like a logo or character for DC government, if it was human generated, it could be copyrighted. But if it was AI generated, it's just free for you.
So the interesting thing, first off, for copyright, it's got to be a particularized enough expression and like kind of long enough to be copyrightable. So the logo you're probably going to end up protecting as a trademark, rather than as a copyright. But like if it was like, let's say as an outreach thing, you guys like BEGA put together a short 5-minute cartoon video, right? If you generate it as people, then either DC government, or if DC government can't own copyright, than the public domain, own the copyright to that, right? But if you generate it with AI, then sure, I guess you own your prompts to the extent your prompts are copyrightable. They're probably not, because they're probably not specific enough in expression to be copyrightable in the first instance. But you might own the prompts that you use to generate it. The prompts are just, if anyone's never used these kinds of things before, it's like literally the descriptions you type in, right? So you're like,
Yeah.
you know, you can use supernatural language, or you can use broken, like, it's. So I would like a picture of a big red hen, and it'll generate a big red hen. And, the better you engineer your prompt, the more likely you are to get what you're thinking of, rather than just like a generic big red hen. But your prompts, that's the input. You might own those, but you wouldn't own the video that came out. If you put in text, then you would own the text, right? But when I say you, I mean DC government. Sorry, but there is no intellectual property to be owned in the AI output, because it is insufficiently creative, right? Under the or insufficiently original, I think is the term of art, under the Copyright Act. Interestingly, there's the limitations in and around the creation of the Copyright Act are like right there in the Constitution, and I think Article 2. So I'm not sure how much freedom Congress has to tweak the need for originality. It's like this super old distinction between different countries, where you're either a sweat of the brow jurisdiction or a not sweat of the brow or originality jurisdiction. DC isn't, or sorry, the United States is not a sweat of the brow jurisdiction. So we don't give copyright to reward you for the effort you put into something. We give copyright to reward you for original works. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Hersh, that was like a straight down the plate legal one, but if there was anything you wanted to add, I yield the floor.
So somebody gave me a solution for sharing the media. I do see that option now, where I could drop the URL and play the videos. But just for the sake of time, I'll just describe the scenes, and because I like to get through, some more of the questions. Let's see here. So next question up was, what responsibilities do we have as AI users, or ethical implications in the use of artificial intelligence in government operations? And just for context, I'll go ahead or ethical provisions we should have in place when we're, operating AI or releasing AI to the public for, certain uses.
I'll very briefly talk about this concept of alignment. Alignment in artificial intelligence means whether or not your objectives as someone who's trying to use artificial intelligence align with the objectives of the AI, and vice versa, right? Is the AI aware of what you're trying to do? And generally, that's not true. And alignment is a very difficult concept, because what you want to do is prevent AI from saying something that could have very dire consequences or lead to liability. You can think about it as, in a couple of different examples, like a self-driving car, like Todd, you had mentioned, prioritizing reaching its destination quickly, but potentially compromising safety or violating traffic laws, right? You could have a hiring AI that prioritizes selecting candidates based off of specific traits or backgrounds, but that would unintentionally lead to discriminatory practices. So even though alignment is not a solved problem, it's something to be aware of on the ethics side of things.
Yep, and so one, I think that's maybe the most important and the most likely place. Whenever I remember, Maurice, you were asking about chaos. Like the place where chaos is most likely to come in is, this is why we test things before they go out, right? And this is why companies test them before they go out, and this is why there's restrictions on what AI will and won't be able to do. But what was I going to say? The gap between what you instruct a thing to value and what you actually value, and the gap between your ability to meaningfully instruct. So in other words, did you really say what you thought you said whenever you present terms? Generally, non-human agents will do what you say, not what you intended to say, and that's the gap that we're talking about, where you can have not just a conscious values gap, but like an unconscious values gap between you and the tool that you're trying to use. Just to sort of boil this down into like usable rules, we've got a few I want to run through real quick, just to some pointers to be aware of, and then I'll elaborate on them to whatever degree you think is appropriate, Maurice. So the first is, and we've touched on this a little, use only the products approved by your agency, right? There's a question in the chat about what products will be available. Let me look at it one more time to make sure I'm answering actually what they ask. Because someone says,
you answered it before. Watch out the rollout with
well, so there's another, says something like, what was it? Let me look real quick. I'm sorry. I don't want it to be hanging out there without an answer. I'm not finding it as I'm talking. Oh, well, the rollout of under the city's licenses. Software companies have a whole lot more license structures than, before I got involved in tech than I would have ever guessed, right? What's available to us is going to turn on sort of two questions, right? One is what the given provider makes available on its government licenses. And even within government, they have like multiple types of licenses, right? There's like knowledge worker licenses and frontline licenses and all that kind of stuff. So one is it made available on the license type that your agency is buying? And two, does your agency want to buy it, right? So licenses are expensive, and every new license needs to have some kind of mission output, right? So what will be available to you will be a function of what's available for sale to government clients, and what your agency decides you need in your role. So a good like kind of rough parallel to understand what I'm getting at there is like Hersh's computer's probably faster than mine. I would assume that to do the work of a data scientist, there's a mission need for him to have like a far superior processor than I do. I don't know that for a fact, but even if I'm not right, that's a close enough approximation to what I'm saying to get across the concept, I think. So like my computer would be less fast because I use mine for research and writing primarily, and like video conferencing and stuff like that. Whereas he might be running much more memory or processing intensive programs than I will, right? So you think about that from the perspective of like AI tools availability in your job. It's going to be a function of, again, like what's made available to the district and what the district decides to buy for the licenses you use. Now, just to give you guys this, I don't want to talk about them and not give them the rules that I would say is: one is use only the products approved by your agency. Two, be aware of cost, and we'll talk more about that one. Three is use approved products for their intended purposes, and that one's super important. Four is do not attempt to disable or circumvent any product controls. And then five is review outputs and properly contextualize them. And that touches, it encompasses more than, but it touches on the discrimination concerns we were talking about earlier, right? So I'm going to move through those. And Maurice, if you want to stop me as I go, if there's one where you want to hear more about, let me know, and I'll dig in on that one. But moving through those in the order I gave them. The first one we can get through quick because we've talked about it a lot. Use the tools that are approved by your agency. The risks that we're talking about in the bullet points I'll cover after this are all made worse if you're using a tool that hasn't been approved, right? So the next one I say, be aware of cost. There's a good it's a good parallel for this. Again, I apologize. I'm a lawyer, so a lot of my illustrations come from law. In the olden days, things like Westlaw and LexisNexis were sometimes made available on a cost model that was driven by like the size of the searches. So what these are, they're databases for lawyers for cases and statutes and regulations. But the size of the search you're running and the number of results it spits out, some cost models would be driven by that, right? So you would, whenever you started work somewhere, if they didn't have like a blanket cost model that said, this is what I pay for a license no matter how it's used, if they instead had a cost model that said, I pay per transaction, then like if you casually decided to do a 50-state survey of like every single state's law whenever you were searching for cases on sexual harassment, then you would get like 49 other states' answers that are not irrelevant but barely persuasive authority in your jurisdiction. and probably interpreting law that isn't actually a statute in your jurisdiction. So, and you're going to pay like a way bigger price for that transaction than if you just search within your state and run a smaller search. So we don't know yet what cost models AI tool providers will use. Based on like our early talks with them, we got a pretty good guess that a lot of them will use kind of it's like a token model where it's transactional, like you have tokens that you can use for, but it's like per transaction you're paying. And once you have a tool issued to you, if you have the ability to use a tool that is metered in this way, you're going to want to be aware of the costs of and the cost model so that you can make efficient use of that the same way you would make efficient use of any other tool the DC government makes available to you, right? The next bullet point is to only use approved products for their intended purpose. This is super important. Maybe the easiest way to talk about it is to identify some misuses of large language models that are like made generally available, so like general AI that hasn't been tailored to a specific use. There are two that I'm aware of. From one is everyone has, if you've been in an AI ethics presentation in the last year, you've definitely heard this story, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time on it. An attorney in New York used like one of these generic large language models to generate a brief for him, and because it doesn't know anything about where to get law or what is and isn't good law or binding law, it just kind of made up cases that looked like cases and made up case citations that look like case citations, and it sounds like a brief, but it's not a brief because there is no substance, because it's not a lawyer AI, it's a general person AI, right? Who can do a good impression of whatever you ask it to do a good impression of. So the reason that lawyer messed up there is, among many reasons, is he used a tool that's for like general conversational text as if it were a tool for like legal advice and legal research and writing. So it's like an off-label use, right? And that's the core of, I think, why he got into trouble there. The other one's kind of interesting just because I grew up in the 90s. So one of the Fugees, Proswell from the Fugees, I don't know if you've been following, but just convicted of being like a foreign agent, basically. Like, and one of the motions he's made for a new trial accuses his attorney of relying on a large language model for preparing his closing argument, right? So to those who aren't familiar with criminal law, like one of the ways you can get a new trial is ineffectiveness of counsel. Basically, you say, look, my lawyer was so bad. Like, there's bad lawyers, and that's part of the risk of playing the game. But mine was so bad that I was denied basically due process because I had this guy fumbling around on my behalf. Well, he's made a motion. This was in the Washington Post last week, I think. Made a motion for a new trial on the basis that of ineffectiveness of counsel, because he used allegedly a large language model to prepare his closing argument. And again, like, large language model is like a guy on the street, right? It can hear natural language and it can answer in natural language. It has no training on how to persuade a jury in a criminal, in a federal criminal trial, right? So these are some of the risks that are associated with off-label uses, right, of AIs. Then I guess I got two more, and I'll do this fast. When I say don't attempt to disable or circumvent product controls, this is huge. There's going to be limitations, like there already are limitations. Like if you play around, you can test this one yourself. If you play around with an image generating AI and try and get it to like show you like really well protected IP, it probably won't, right? So if you go and asking for, I want Mickey Mouse doing X or Y or Z, it's probably not going to give you Mickey Mouse. And there's also like, I'm getting an echo. But there's also like there's content filters on output, like to keep these from accidentally generating like child sexual abuse material or like overly grisly like material and stuff like that. So like these kind of safeguards are being put in place even on the consumer grade ones. If your agency buys an AI tool, it's going to have lots of safeguards like that. Don't try to disable them. Maybe the easiest example of people disabling is like if you drive a Tesla and use the autopilot, it has like, I think every 30 seconds, you have to like kind of tweak the wheel to let it know that you're just using it as a driver assist, not a driver replacement. And there's like all kinds of online forums where people are like, well, here's a way to, just wiggle your volume knob or something, like ways to get around actually following the safety regulations, or sorry, not regulation, the safety guardrails that are put in place by the creator of the tool. One, there's obvious risk, right? We can get sued if you're self-driving your new DC fleet Tesla, or I don't know if any are in the fleet, but if you're self-driving or auto-driving your new DC fleet Tesla, and it shows up in the fact pattern that you disabled the driver assist guardrails, and then you hit someone, we're going to pay more, right? When we have to settle that case or lose that case. So that's a reason why you don't disable or try to circumvent product controls. They're there for safety, or they're there to avoid legal liability, and I think it's actually a violation of more than one of the standing IT regulations we have in DC government. The last one is just whenever we say review outputs and properly contextualize them, facial recognition is a good way to explain this, right? So one of the reasons people are afraid of facial recognition technology in some uses is like it's wrong, right? It's wrong a lot sometimes, depending on the model and depending on what you're trying to use it for. But like if you imagine a world where I don't know, you have to use your facial recognition to like have access to your bank or whatever. If it fails to authenticate you with your image, you can't just lose access to your money, right? Your bank has to have a means of addressing and properly contextualizing that failure of that model, right? And this, this pop up in law enforcement and all of those other areas, but something to be aware of that you will get output, right? You still have the human responsibility of and a professional responsibility of assessing the output and deciding whether it's useful, not just abdicating your own responsibility in favor of, the machine told me to, right? And that would wrap up those points from me.
Okay. So that was all great information. And we're almost coming up on time on the next one. So we can move through these ones rather quickly. I mean, we're almost to the end. But I think people were hard to hear me while I was letting the movie play because I could hear sound on my end. So I think the sound coming out and me talking, it was hard for some people to hear me. So for this one, I'm going to let it play a little bit just so you can just see visually what's going on. And then I'll pause it and then just kind of describe. And then it'll lead us into, this question up here. I think it's place to start here. You heard a little audio? Okay. So yeah, real quickly, what's going on in this movie? This is called, I think it was Outside the Wire, right? And so there's a military operation, and the gentleman that had his shirt off and you kind of see through him a little bit, of course, he's some type of, robot or artificial intelligence. But what was interesting about this to me is that he was a captain. He was this soldier's superior. And so instead of being like a tool, per se, at least to him, a user where he's using the AI to, facilitate his work, he actually had to take orders from from the artificial intelligence. And so leading into my next question, because I know, we can probably develop AI as a tool to give us feedback and let us know what's the best route to take, or, best practices, in certain decision-making practices. But two questions. How is AI thinking? That was one question. And then should we be letting AI think for us?
Let me answer the first part of that question. I'll throw it over to Todd. How is AI thinking? So when we're talking about generative AI, these models have been trained on massive amounts of data. We're talking about billions and billions of books, texts, Wikipedia articles, even things that the general public would not be able to collect and train these models on. And through the training, they have billions of parameters associated with how they're going to interpret that text and create an output based off of the outputs that they're seeing. So you can take, for example, that it reads all of a Wikipedia article except for the last paragraph, and then it's asked to come up with the last paragraph, And then it improves itself by seeing how close it got to the original last paragraph. A lot of people say that this is what's known as a stochastic parrot. A stochastic parrot is basically an AI that is parroting back information that it may have learned from large data sets rather than understanding what it's actually reading, what it's actually taking into account, and how it's processing it, and how all of the logic fits together. But as these models have gotten larger and larger, the argument that these models are stochastic parrots and more so closer to what's known as artificial generalized intelligence, where it can accomplish a whole range of tasks and understand a whole range of contexts. A lot of folks have been in favor that this is quickly becoming artificial generalized intelligence. So then you have questions about whether or not it's conscious and aware. And right now, researchers, they don't have a framework to determine whether or not we can gauge consciousness from generative AI. There are a few researchers that have criteria, but those criteria, they're not hard and fast rules. And so it may be that it doesn't go beyond what we currently have as friendly assistants, as large language models, but it's also possible that it gets into the realm of artificial generalized intelligence and becomes, I wouldn't say sentient, but I would say closer to having a lot more information and being able to reason than what we would expect.
That was one of the questions in the chat, like, how far developed and could we expect, AI to develop a consciousness? Is that even a realistic, assumption?
So what would I say? One of my longest enduring personal academic interests is like philosophy, like metaphysics and epistemology. So like people like Hume and Leibniz are the two best I can identify here. Leibniz for his monadology and Hume for his critique of necessary connection. But there's a problem there's like a traditional problem in philosophy and in epistemology, this idea of what they call the philosophical zombie, right? So it's like if you see a person, you can think about it kind of also as like the split in psychology between like a behaviorist approach and like I don't know what you call the other, like an introspective or non-behavioralist approach or whatever. But if you look at a person from the outside and they seem to be acting like they're thinking, are they thinking, right? Do they have a subjective experiential component, right? The idea of a philosophical zombie is just an old philosophy term for it. It's a person who does everything observably like a person with a subjective experience, but who doesn't actually exist, right? A machine with no ghost, right? So even in humans, there's no way to answer the question, right? Because we can't conceive of the subjective experience of being, right? And it's well documented that there is absolutely no way to answer that question, even for humans. It's really no different for a non-human agent, right? So you can look at it from like if it were psychology, from like a behaviorist approach, and say, okay, if I present it with inputs, can it understand its environment? Can it understand the inputs and then respond rationally, right, to the situation as the situation changes, right? If so, then it sure looks like it's thinking, right? And there's then the question is just how developed a rational agent is it, right? The table-driven AI, like that I mentioned earlier, if you had a table-driven model with perfect, infinite, manually prepared table to guide its actions, it would be indistinguishable from the outside. And this is just one of those settled laws of philosophy, if there is such a thing, be indistinguishable from the outside, even though it's literally just a table-driven, simple model from a perfectly sentient creature, right? So to answer that part of the question is like, is it thinking? Can it think for itself? I don't know. We don't know if you don't know if I'm thinking. I don't know if you're thinking, and that's the core of the philosophical zombie problem in metaphysics and epistemology. So we have to have faith and empathy that the other person is just as human as we are, but it's not the kind of thing you can directly observe because it's by definition a wholly subjective experience, right? In terms of should we let them think for us? Yes. And should we let them act for us? Yes, within parameters. years, right? So good things that AI can do now, for example, if I want to, I'm at 200i right now. If I want to go see Maurice, and I want to drive, which I don't, but if I wanted to drive, I'd hop in my car and I would let the model think for me. I would not go to Random McNally and surprise everyone there by buying a road atlas for the first time since like 1996 or something. Like someone else would buy a road atlas from us on paper. I would not go do that. I would not then open up the road atlas and then start doing my own sort of like search algorithm to identify the best route and then just disregard current traffic or weather conditions or like road closures or anything like that and plot my course to go see Maurice. I would let it decide for me, right? And if it were a few more years, probably further than people, definitely further than investors think, but like for a few more years in the future and self-driving cars actually worked, I would absolutely let it do the work for me, not just the thinking. I would hop in the car and let it drive me to go see Maurice, because then I can play on my phone or do whatever else. So as long as it's within guardrails and well-tested, well-validated guardrails, the whole point is not only to let it think for you, but let it act for you. And the thinking that it should be doing is like the boring stuff of the incredibly long, annoying decision tree of which roads and streets to take.
So in short, if it's well programmed to make the decisions on that
and validated is the core too. Like so,
validated.
It's well
Go
tested.
ahead and let it think.
Yeah, that's why I would keep my eyes and hands active if I were in a self-driving car today. Is because they aren't sufficiently validated in their performance yet, in my opinion. But a few years from now, I'd 100% once it's adequately validated, let it do the thinking and acting for me on something as simple as driving me from point A to point B. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and then real quick, because we got another one starting up at 2:15.
Yep.
And you've answered the question, but we'll end on that note. This was basically the apocalypse scene from the Terminator movies, which they warned us, not to, let artificial intelligence take over, our military operations or even analyze our military operations. And then, it became self-aware and, pointed to humans as being their own enemies and thus the enemy. and, and ended the world. But should we be afraid of artificial intelligence?
What do you think, Hersh?
My answer is no, but we should do our homework. And there's a lot of homework to do. You have to understand capabilities and limits, everything, Todd, that you had mentioned. And this is the case with any advanced technology. It's important to understand what it can and can't do and what it's built to do and how you should use it. It will certainly change the way that we do things and the way that power is distributed through society, but all technologies do that. And the key is how we develop applications of that technology and how we remain committed to our core values and ethical principles.
I think that's a perfect explanation, and I think that's a good one to end on. So if you have anything else for us, Maurice, let us know. But otherwise, thank you, and thank everybody for letting us be a part of Ethics Week.
Thank you. Very helpful, very insightful. More from your office, actually. And then, for some of your notes for the different,
Yep, I think for notes, and I'm losing audio a little bit sometimes, Maurice, but for notes, let me condense down our notes a little bit to like right now these are notes for like Hersh and I, and they're like way more detailed than I think we would need them to be for like no one would want to read what we have right now. It's like single spaced in like 6 pages, but I can work to condense it down to something that'll be helpful, and I'm sure that OCTO would love to give more presentations. We anytime our fellow DC government workers are interested in what we're doing, we feel good about that.
Yeah, again, thank you guys for your time. I appreciate you working with me on this and sharing this information with DC.
Take care, guys.